Good morning, everyone, and thank you for attending the Convergint Insight 2020. I'm Jim Madsen, Director of Business Development for the fire business within Convergint, and I've been in the fire alarm industry for over 35 years with one of the, as a senior leader with one of the major fire alarm manufacturers. I'm joined today by two of our colleagues, Stephanie Muir and Steve O'Connell, as well as Dwight Wills, who is a senior executive with buildingreports.com. Could you all please introduce yourselves? We'll start with you, Stephanie.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. Good morning, everyone. I'm Stephanie Muir. I'm happy to be here to share in the discussion today. I'm the sales manager serving the Southern California area with Convergint, and I have about 20 years in the fire alarm industry. I've held a variety of responsibilities throughout my career, from direct sales to account management to service department leadership to sales leadership, and I'm really looking forward to our discussion today. So thank you. Back to you, Jim.
Thanks. Steve?
Hey, good morning. I am Steve O'Connell. I'm working out of the Convergint office in Seattle. I've been in fire and life safety systems for just about 29 years, with the past 16 here at Convergint. I work with building owners and managers creating support agreements for their fire and life safety systems. I have kind of a specialty in healthcare. I do a lot of hospitals and clinics. So yeah, glad to be here. This is going to be fun.
Great. And Dwight.
Hello, my name is Dwight Wills from Building Reports. I'm Vice President of Sales and Marketing. We're a 20-year-old company. In fact, we've been providing our technology to Convergint technologies since pretty much they started. So they've been using us for their entire life to document their fire and life safety inspections.
Thanks, Dwight. So we'll get started. So as we get started, just for those in the audience, if you do happen to have a question, you've got a feature there on the screen, and we'll allow some time at the end to address those questions, certainly as many as we can. So when you think about fire alarm system technology, when you compare it to the security industry, the technology within fire, predominantly has been very, very slow. Right, it's very slow in developing. I mean, some systems were even DOS-based, I think, up until just a few years ago. But over the last couple of years, when you think about the fire technology, the changes that have happened, when you think about multi-criteria detectors that can tell the difference between what type of smoke, is it dust, is it steam? You've got addressable notification appliances, as well, that are really increasing the amount of technologies in that space. And then when you look at the types of technology platforms that incorporate things like mass notification and graphic command systems, it really gets complex, and the technology is really being moved very quickly. And how we test and inspect fire alarm systems, to ensure that they will work when they're needed and remain compliant, with governing authorities, that's starting to change, as well. And that's really going to be our topic today. So Dwight, when you think about it, the obvious purpose of a fire alarm system is, of course, to make sure that it's going to work when it needs to. It's going to notify the occupants that there's some type of a, emergency they need to respond to. And it's also required by law that, they're tested. Right. And it's up to the building owner to make sure they're staying in compliance with that, with those laws and requirements. So Dwight, the industry's come a long way, since the days of handwritten forms. What are you seeing that's really becoming new to the industry today?
Well, new to the industry today is probably third-party reporting. I'll get to that in a second. You brought up a couple of points there. We started in 2000. Basically because we were from the industry and we saw a lot of companies utilizing paper to kind of get around the labor part of the inspection, test, and maintenance. So we wanted to create a system that would allow high-end companies to prove to their customers that they were doing the inspection, test, and maintenance labor, and that they were documenting it well. So we created a barcoding system that allowed companies like Convergint to go ahead and easily gather data, very granular data on the equipment and the devices they were actually doing the inspection, test, and maintenance work on. Their system also provided a better method of reporting that data to the customer, providing granular data to the customer if they liked. And additionally, we utilized what was a fairly new or new to the industry product back then called the internet, or the cloud, if you like, to provide that reporting to the customer and to utilize methods to transfer data between a field employee and their headquarters. So that was all kind of groundbreaking stuff back then. We're all very used to it now. But what that has led to is the ability for that reporting to be shared with the local jurisdictions. And that's really where the biggest changes have happened over the last decade, is a group of companies have emerged that are outsourcing a lot of the requirements of the jurisdiction for the fire marshal to gather all that data and provide it to the jurisdiction so that jurisdiction can see very rapidly which particular facilities within their jurisdiction are not in compliance. So that's the primary thing that we see changing in today in inspection, test, and reporting maintenance in the technology.
No, I really appreciate that. Steve or Stephanie, do you have any comments? Steve, you're on mute.
Yeah, rookie mistake. The Seattle has a system like this where you go through a company called Compliance Engine, and it is a cost that people have to realize is being borne, and it's $30 per system per year. Additionally, I've seen recently the city of Seattle starting to talk fines to building owners for not filing or doing their testing. So there are some costs associated with that. The other thing I'd mention is this: the BR.com system, or buildingreports.com, has been a real asset during this time of dealing with testing through COVID-19 restrictions. The ability to handle these reports electronically, but also the ability to pull them up on a Zoom call with a customer and review those. You'll hear me refer to healthcare a lot, but the average fire marshal report may be 2 or 3 pages long, and that satisfies most testing requirements in most industries. That same building, if it was a hospital, will have a 60-page report from buildingreports.com. And the ability to review that in real time, online, no contact with whoever needs to know that has been terrific.
And that's a great point that you brought up there, Steve, because that was the item that I was going to build on this topic, which is, sometimes there are 2 forms of documentation that need to be submitted. One that's submitted through your local authority having jurisdiction or the fire department, and another to the authority having jurisdiction within the healthcare industry, say the Joint Commission, for instance. So you'll really be looking at a couple different forms of documentation. So it's really the same test in 2 different forms based on the requirements from each individual. So just wanted to point that out.
That reminds me of a situation where we were at odds with the timing of some of the reports coming from one of these third-party people. And again, this was healthcare. So healthcare has very specific requirements for when you do a test versus when it was last done. So in this case, it was a quarterly test and has to be done, plus or minus 10 days, I believe. At the first of the month, that building manager received a report from the third-party certificator saying, you are out of compliance. Your report wasn't filed this month. And for 3 years in a row, this happened. And we had to explain to them, we can't do it in compliance with them, or you will be out of compliance with Joint Commission. So your choice. We either move the test to where it falls and synchronizes, or they need to just be a little bit more patient and understand the real world of codes. So there is some thought that has to go into it.
Yeah, and then in some cases, of course, you'll see both. Right? In some cases, you'll have to comply with both. So it just really depends on the authority having jurisdiction on how they want to see that documentation. So that's just an important thing to think about.
Yeah, and some facilities may not have experienced this yet, where the jurisdiction has required their documentation to be provided to them by one of these services. But they're coming, they're spreading quite rapidly. And if your jurisdiction doesn't have it yet, you will have it in the future, very, very likely. To that point, we've actually, at Building Reports, we provide a solution. We do it a little differently. Like Steve mentioned, there was a cost to file, which that cost is normally passed on to you, the facility or the building owner. We provide a free service to allow that cost to be borne by us, basically. because we primarily tend to use technology to solve that problem, not labor.
Right. Thanks, team. I'm going to switch gears here just a little bit. So if you think about the service provider, right? So, a building owner, they have a lot of choices in who does provide, the service. When you're looking at the fire alarm test and inspection, it could be a direct office, of a manufacturer. It could be a fire alarm dealer, or it can even be an electrical contractor. So if I'm a building owner and I'm looking for a service provider, I guess I'll go to you, Stephanie. What should I be looking for in terms of some of the capabilities they may have?
Sure. Thanks, Jim. So this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. I was a service manager, in the past, and tons of feedback in this area. So there are certainly several layers to this question, depending on the unique attributes of each business, the overall fire life safety goals, and really the local AHJ requirements. So I'll start by talking about the top 3 areas of feedback that I've received from customers over the years. And really the priorities are surrounded within the critical needs for reliable partners, technical skill set, and response. So starting with reliability, it's critical that the provider provide to the building owner, and they really select a level of urgency to the building owner. So this is particularly important with communication from the provider and setting the expectations of the relationship. So one example of this would be, really, how is a service call placed? Is there a preferred platform for requested service, in order to organize, prioritize, and really track the repair process? For some of the larger business, this is really a key component to managing various fire life safety systems and the status of each of these systems in a break-fix environment, for instance, or used as an inspection deficiency management tool. So the other piece of this is really, how does a provider communicate when things don't go as expected? Sometimes the process of troubleshooting critical errors in a system can take more time. So what is the course of action, and how is it communicated to a building owner? Really addressing the issue and partnering with the building owner on a fire life safety plan to ensure the safety of the occupants and property are key. So, when we think about technical skill set, really the expectation is self-explanatory, right? In that a building owner expects the provider to be capable and qualified to understand how to properly test, inspect, repair, for your fire life safety systems of all types in your building. So, for example, when it comes to software-based fire alarm systems, we'll be talking about that a bit today. The installing contractor typically holds the rights to the software. So essentially, all software-based fire alarm systems are proprietary. There's elements of testing and maintenance that can be done, but to the extent of the maintenance realm. So when we get into programming, such as adds, moves, or changes, this is when really a qualified professional understands the landscape of such actions and works together with the building owner to partner with the installing contractor. So really, at the end of the day, a building owner is looking for a partner that understands the conditions and processes of how to take care of their systems properly and inform them of when an additional resource is needed to solve an issue. And then lastly, onto response. And this is a critical one. And I know these all sound very basic, but these are critical items of feedback that I've received over the years. Really, a building owner needs to know that a provider has been, that they really have bench strength and staff to respond to emergency service calls in a timely manner. And if an emergency arises at 2 a.m., that building owner needs to know that they can successfully speak to a provider and know that somebody's on the way, or they can talk through a situation over the phone. And this is critical. They need a provider that they can rely on. And, this breaks down when an urgent response is not met. So reliability, technical skill set, and response are 3 major areas of concern for building owners. And this is just what I've seen over the years. We can definitely go into more examples with technology and other features, but those are really the 3 highlights that I've seen in building owners on what they look for in a service provider. So.
Yeah, and I would agree with that as well, right? When you think about, fire alarm systems, and to your point with being software based, I mean, all fire alarm systems are proprietary from that perspective. So it's really, is it the service channel or the distribution network that's proprietary? I think it's really what you want to, be aware of, right? To make sure that you're not going down a path where you're going to have a single source provider. So, Steve or Dwight, do you have any thoughts there? Steve, you're still on mute.
I'm trying to be good here. I really subscribe to, and a little preface here. Our office in Seattle is a very strong service office. We've done service since we were founded with the original offices probably 18 years ago, and we have people now, or companies that are in their third and fourth 5-year contract with us. And it's because we try to build, and I really encourage people to look for a partner, not just a vendor. Someone you can communicate with, somebody you have trust in, somebody who brings something to the party that helps you understand what you're trying to do to take care of your building. So it's more of a relationship thing and not a transaction. I also see, since I do work a lot in healthcare, there are some great organizations that I see a lot of building engineers and facility managers participate in, and you'll all know which ones are appropriate to your industry, but ones like BOMA that are fairly general, Building Owners and Managers Association, but we work a lot with ASHE, the American Society for Healthcare Engineering, and their local chapters. There's a very strong one here in Washington State, and the point of that is those engineers and facility managers talk to each other like nobody I've ever seen in any other industry, which is a two-edged sword, by the way. So ask help, ask if you're not happy with the way things are going, ask your peers. They're not gonna steer you wrong. They're gonna tell you, yeah, don't have the soup, or yeah, this is good. Try this. Call that person. Don't sit there, because as Jim started out with here, you are responsible for that building and that documentation. You entrust it to a vendor, but worst case, the vendor's going to get fired. You're on the hook as the building owner for that documentation.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
And to build on that as well, Steve, you just put this thought in my mind as well. Some feedback that I've received also from just over the years is really looking for a company that understands how to design, install, and service the systems, because sometimes what you'll find is installing contractors, or even if it's we'll just call it an electrical contractor, down the road when you're servicing a system, there could be, some misunderstandings as far as, the quality of install versus, is this a service issue? And those types of issues can arise. So a company that can understand what that landscape looks like and know how to navigate those waters is an important part, when you're a building owner, and understanding how to get something resolved. Is this something that should have been covered under a warranty versus something that, truly is a service call? It truly is a break fix situation. So, we certainly do have subject matter experts across our organization that know how to have those discussions. And that's an important point to make too, because this is just an issue that can come up more often than we'd like to see. No,
I appreciate that. I think it's, it's spot on. So I'm going to jump ahead here a little bit. So, and Steve and Stephanie, and Dwight, you've all mentioned that, the fire alarm industry is very, very code driven, right? And codes can change from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. They can change by occupancy, et cetera. So you look downstream, right? Do you see any, new pending code changes that's going to come along the way that might affect some of our clients or potential clients? I think, Steve, you can probably start with that one.
Sure. Since I'm already unmuted, I'll go first.
There you go. That's kind of why I did that.
Thank you. Code, again, it is a code-driven industry, and it's really important that people understand which codes they're responsible to comply with, and there are a lot of them, and not just which code, but which version of which code. So as every code comes out, there are always changes, improvements. At least somebody thought it was an improvement when they put it in there. The many jurisdictions now are going to be well along with the 2013 version of NFPA 72, which is the fire alarm standard we work to primarily. And that introduced some new things that you may or may not be aware of or doing. And one of those is the concept of the test plan, which is hopefully a collaborative effort between the the building owner and the testing vendor to talk about beginning to end what you're going to be testing, and if in many cases the fire alarm is dealing with a lot of auxiliary functions in the building, where does the responsibility of the fire alarm vendor end, and when does somebody else's responsibility begin? This used to be kind of fast and loose, where a fire alarm vendor may test a smoke detector and is observing a door closing in an elevator lobby. By the code, technically, our responsibility must end at that interposing relay. What happens to the door is really in somebody else's court. And that's one of the classic examples they use in the literature is once that door releases, does the door close and latch and seal correctly? Does it even close is really not our responsibility based on the terms qualification or qualified personnel. That becomes an NFPA 80 door vendor kind of a thing, or an internal thing to the customer. So the reason for this, I think, really is to not allow gaps. If you have a vendor that just looks at the relay and doesn't tell you that the door didn't drop, there was something in the way, the carpet bunched up, whatever, so that you can get that door vendor in to certify your doors, there's a potential for holes in your testing process. So that test plan is mandated now to hopefully avoid those gaps. The fire alarm testing and that'll apply to elevator recall, AHU shutdown, all those systems that are affected in the building when a fire alarm system is tripped. Dwight, you had some information on the recalled equipment for NFPA 72?
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize it, but we have a codes and standards manager on staff because we have over 200,000 users. So we believe those 200,000 users have to be represented. And that includes Convergint's customers, et cetera, that those users need to be represented to the code bodies. And so that's why we have that codes and standards manager. And part of what we provide in our technology is we provide notification of recalled devices, anything that's under recall by a manufacturer, or even sometimes a safety warning or a safety notice, I think they call them on the extinguisher side. We pick up that information and report that right inside our reporting to the building owners, because building owners don't distribute those products. How would they know that there's a product recall? And a lot of the times the recalls aren't great notices in the first place. They don't get to the distributors of the products in some cases. And or it might go to one person at that distributor. So therefore the building owner never ever finds out about that device being recalled. So we felt that was not what the codes intended. The codes intended to notify a building owner of the recall. So we've had a recall, manufacturer recall links in our reporting for many, many years. And so we pushed that with the code councils, and they agreed to go ahead and put that requirement in NFPA 72 for recall devices. So if any device is under recall, it's up to the vendor to report that to the building owner. So that's a little bit of a change for NFPA 72 in the latest codes.
I was recently made aware of another change that I hadn't seen, and this is in the 2019 edition. So again, you got to know which edition is applicable to your building and where it's located. And this was on the, they're now introducing a temperature test for batteries. So we've always had to do load tests and document that. Now you're going to use a non-contact infrared thermometer, which everybody has in their pocket now because everybody's checking everybody's forehead. This requirement will have you documenting that, and then I think either mandatory replacing the batteries on a 3-year schedule, or changing the way that load testing is done too. So find out if that applies to you, if that code. And I keep talking about this because it's near and dear to my heart and in healthcare, because all of our codes, whether it's NFPA 75 or 72 or 25 for water-based testing for sprinkler systems, that's all based on what version of NFPA 101 or the Life Safety Code is mandated by CMS, which is the government. Healthcare is always lagging behind the rest of industry. In fact, 3 or 4 years ago, we made a jump in that Life Safety Code from the 2000 code to the 2012 code, and that jumped us in the fire alarm code from the 99 version to the 2010 version. So a lot of things change very suddenly. I'd also point out that while that's happening, you may have a different version of code for the city your building is in and the state your building is in. So always be aware of which one is the most restrictive and document to that level.
There's one item that I just wanted to make a quick comment on. It kind of goes back a little bit earlier in the discussion, Steve, or when you were talking about the different functions of a system. And I just wanted to comment on this before we move on, because I think it's an important point to make. When you think about a fire alarm system and you think about, the sequence of operations, that's a huge topic when you're looking at and deciding on a service provider or a testing agency to conduct a functional test on the system, particularly when we're talking about complex fire alarm systems. It's something that I've seen in the past as well. This is why I just wanted to raise this so that, for anyone on the line, if they hadn't heard that term before, just jot it down, understanding the sequence of operations, because understanding how the system was designed and intended to function, in a sequence of items. Steve, you mentioned elevators, damper functions, doors, things like that. Sometimes there's organizations or, individuals that are running specific properties that might not understand that that's an important part of understanding how to test the equipment properly. And, sometimes incidents can occur when a testing agency doesn't understand how to address that and understand really what that looks like. So just wanted to make a quick comment on that.
That is a great point, because we do see more and more where building managers or facility managers would like, I hate to use the term because it always comes back and bites me, the one throat to choke, where they don't want to deal with a testing vendor for the sprinkler systems, the fire alarm systems, the backflows, the extinguishers, and they would like one company to handle all that. So they have a single point of contact, which allows for way better coordination between those trades to make sure everybody's there on the right day together in the right combination. These testing plans are set up to be gap-free. It makes it simpler. You pay a little bit extra for that coordination, but you probably save a ton in the long run. We have one customer that loves us doing that just because they were failing to coordinate them themselves, and the sprinkler company would show up, but the fire alarm company was never notified, and vice versa. So they'd wind up paying one vendor or the other for showing up and not being able to work. So they put that all on us, and now if we blow that coordination, we get to pay for that. So that's an asset to the building owner.
I think that probably leads as well, I think, into the next topic, right? When you think about inspecting and testing a fire alarm system, you typically need 2 inspectors, right? You need one inspector out that's testing the devices, and you typically have another inspector at the panel. Sometimes it's, a building representative may do that. But when you think about today's technology and the software-based systems that are available today, and more discrete information out and technology at the edge of the system, right? It's really kind of led to, technology-wise anyway, for the ability for a single inspector to really inspect that fire alarm system, right? Where, they would have to carry some type of a device, but they can activate a smoke detector or a pull station, and they can control the fire alarm panel or see what's happening at the fire alarm panel from that device. There's nothing in the code that really says you have to have more than one person, test it. And there's been a lot of presentations made, I think, to NFPA, as well as the Automatic Fire Alarm Association, around the ability for a single inspector to perform a fire alarm inspection. So when you really think about it, do you think that's a safe practice, and that'll be acceptable by most of the authorities? I guess, Dwight, maybe you can have add something there.
Sure. The ability is there, but the question is it a safe practice? We at Building Reports don't believe it's a safe practice, primarily because while you may be able to sound the alarms from a remote device while you're somewhere else in the building and operate the fire alarm panel to an extent, most companies are placing signage out to state and advising people, if you hear an alarm today, we're testing the fire alarm system. So it'll be a false alarm. Don't worry about it. So then it comes down to, how are you supposed to notify all those people who believe that an alarm going off is actually a false alarm and they don't have to do anything? How do you notify them that actually it's a real alarm? You need to evacuate the facility. And really, the only way that I've ever heard of doing that is with bodies, with multiple people. So that normally starts with the person at the control panel. And there have been documented cases where that person at the control panel has saved lives when a fire actually broke out in a building that was under inspection and test, and the panel had been quieted. And so we believe that's the safe practice. We're a little uncertain about a one-person inspection being really safe, just to try and save a little bit of labor cost.
Stephanie or Steve, do you have any comments there? Have you seen that in practice in your particular areas?
Yeah, I'll just, oh, no, go ahead, Steve.
No, I have, no, your turn.
Okay. It was just a quick comment that definitely concur with what Dwight is stating. You know, when we look at it from a safety aspect and we think about, you know, what does the role of a fire inspector look like out in the field, you know, testing duct detectors, smoke detectors, you know, and whatnot. And, you know, there's definitely a safety concern with that. And so when we look at, you know, how do we protect our colleagues? How do we make sure that our teams are performing safely? You know, that goes hand in hand, of course, with the building owner. You know, it's going to be in our best interest to make sure that they do have a partner with them out at a particular job site, because we do understand what that looks like and what that risk can potentially be. And the question is, do we want to embark on what that risk looks like? And we certainly don't want to do that, particularly to save labor on that. So absolutely concur with Dwight's comments there.
Yeah, thanks. And that kind of, when you start talking about safety, right, it kind of leads into the next question, right, where we're talking about, you know, in a pandemic environment with COVID, right, it's changed the way that we work, it's changed the way that we live, and, you know, in many, many ways. So when you look at, you know, the accessibility to buildings to get in and do that inspection, right, are the authorities allowing us to postpone or push off, you know, inspections? Have you seen any of that? And then how do the inspectors stay healthy, right? So when you think about it, they're going in all these different occupancies, you know, whether it's into a hospital or manufacturing plant, et cetera. But, you know, how is everybody staying healthy? How are we staying safe in this COVID environment? And what are you seeing?
Go ahead, Stephanie. I've got a lot, so why don't you do it, and I won't repeat what you have.
Okay. All right. Pretty brief on this one, but you know, first of all, when we think about the pandemic, I mean, it's definitely touched us all in unique and challenging ways. So really, my first thought on this topic is that our number one desire is to ensure the safety and health of our staff, our customers, our partners, with all the factors that we can control. And that's such as PPE, daily health assessments for our colleagues. So, you know, within our daily health assessments, our colleagues answer a series of questions that center around the colleagues' availability to be really fit for duty. So these questions ask our colleagues to take their temperature, answer questions about, you know, health conditions that can be indicators of, you know, really potentially underlying issues. So we do our diligence to ensure a safe start for the day. And so as for the requirements, you know, that's really going to depend on the authority having jurisdiction, such as your local fire marshal, for instance, as well as the current conditions of your systems. So, you know, really, it's a fire life safety risk, or are there minor troubles that can be worked through over time on your system? So you all probably have a sense of what is urgent and what can be planned for at a later time. So we also know that our customers and partners are acting with the health and safety of their staff in mind. So the changes that we've seen in the field are social distancing adherence, more stringent PPE practices, really along with minimal staff needed to support the work on site safely. And some are taking advantage of empty buildings to get work completed timely, while others have to take additional caution and even having weekend work considered to accomplish the tasks needed. So I'll pass it to you, Steve, to add to that.
Oh, that's good stuff. Thank you. One of the things when this began developing early on was, are we going to be, will owners and managers of buildings be given any slack by the authorities having jurisdiction? And the short answer was no. There was very little of that. Most AHAs were requiring testing to continue. I have seen some things where locally there was some delays permitted for public health reasons, but not repairs. The system must be kept running. If the building is abandoned or empty, the system must be kept running. NFPA had published a one-pager on this, and the quote I saw is, "Those responsible for buildings should adhere to expected schedules. Systems in abandoned and construction sites should remain operating." And a lot of these buildings were empty. They were A occupancies, B occupancies, E occupancies. So we took advantage of a short window there where all the Seattle schools were empty and they were behind on their testing. We jumped in and did like 20 schools for them, which was a really great thing to put together in a short time, all via email, teleconference, and to not only get those buildings tested, but help keep our staff working. There were a lot of companies that were hurting through this. And I'm really going to talk more about the human angle of this than the technical angle. But I did, again, near and dear to my heart is healthcare. The alphabet soup agencies, CMS, Joint Commission, DNV, really made no provision for delayed testing. It needed to happen on time. So I'm going to give you an example of one where we forged a partnership again with a customer in a very short length of time. I had put together a contract for a customer who was a large state hospital, new contract, first on-site testing scheduled for March of 2020. Well, we all know what happened in March. And many of you have managed through your testing already this year. You've done at least an annual, but the calendar tells me that some of you still have your annual coming up and it hasn't been done yet. Some of you are responsible to do not just annuals, but semi-annuals and even some quarterlies. This hospital it was on my mind when we were planning this discussion, and I went to my service operations manager, and I give full credit to him for this content. Eddie Pena, he's a wonderful guy, and he got a hold of this contract, and I asked him, give me your impressions. What happened during this process? What was unique about the process? And his comments were, and I have them just as bullet points because they really sink in that way. He had never worked through a more stressful or unsure time, and he's a many-year veteran of sales and service. He was always struck by it was one thing to put his life at risk, but asking others to do the same is a whole lot more challenging, and that really does hit home whether you're a manager of a facility or managing a service department. Balancing that safety. That safety of the colleagues and the customers with our responsibility to fulfill that commitment to the customer. Working with our colleagues to see what they see out there. Are you okay? Is everything going well out there? Then the processes of sitting down literally face to face with the customer, mask to mask, depending on what day it was in March, and working through a plan to get everybody there and get everybody safe. The one mechanical thing was the challenge of getting PPE, sanitizer, disinfectant spray to staff up testing crews, to cover millions of dollars worth of testing, and it's not available. So a big challenge. We had a situation in this particular hospital where there was an increase in cases. It's in the news media, the number of cases that were going up. So we suspended testing and had to go back in and work with the customer again and come up with a new plan. And again, it's this partnership and this mutual respect that gets hammered out in tough situations like this. Eddie literally wanted to sit down with this guy and look him in the eye and say, here's our situation. How do we get through this and get you done what you need to be done, have done, and keep our people safe? one thing he talked about is just how humbled he was by our staff and our inspectors and how willing they were to go in and do it right and get it done on behalf of the customer. There was even a period of fear when there was a COVID outbreak in a unit they had recently tested. So everybody on the testing team got tested, and fortunately they all came back clear. So the moral of the story is it can be done. It is difficult. I can tell you it probably wasn't priced that way because there's a whole lot of extra time in working around these things. I would tell you as a building owner, if you haven't been through this, or as we look at a second or third wave, depending on how you determine that, engage your testing vendor early and get a plan in place with contingencies. Make sure if you can, do it early. Joint Commission usually doesn't mind if you do it a little early. They're really not happy if you do it late. So work together, collaborate, and build that partnership. We look back at it now and having, I believe, met all of our testing commitments for the last 8 months, we've really hit our stride. And I think we've got this figured out as it stands today. And no one so far in our testing and service department has contracted the virus, at least not due to contact with customer facilities. So
that's great.
I have to say, you as in service sales, you have to understand that my product doesn't bolt to the wall and have wires coming out of it. My product is people. And I exchange people's efforts for dollars. And those people are obviously an incredibly valuable and appreciated asset.
All right, appreciate it. So Dwight, from a broader perspective, with buildingreports.com, you work with, hundreds of, companies like Convergint. Did you see any kind of dips in the number of inspections being done? And, have we gotten caught up?
We did. We saw, Friday, March 13, I think, is when most people were notified that they were going to be working from home. The remainder of March actually went pretty good, but there was a lot of news going on in that time. And a lot of associations took efforts, including NFPA, AFAA, NFSA, AFSA, all of these associations that work in the industry put in a lot of effort to make sure that it was understood that what the work that fire and life safety prevention companies do was actually an essential service. And so once that news got out, we did start noticing some state fire marshals actually giving instruction to get back out and inspect. And so what we noticed was March, actually the numbers came in pretty good. April, we saw a dip. First dip we'd ever really seen in usage as a company. And we definitely did see a dip in April as that confusion got carried through, and a lot of companies were trying to figure out how to navigate this new reality. And then in May, we saw it pick back up, not to normal levels, but definitely pick back up. And then June just crushed it. Everybody went inspecting in June, and we had new records of usage in June. And that's not a month we normally see new records of usage. So the year is not following its historical normals, nor would we expect it to, but we are seeing it pretty much back to normal. We're not going to experience the growth we normally experience each year, but we are still going to experience growth. So it's just not to the percentages we had been experiencing in previous years. We kind of anticipate at this stage that, who knows what the future is going to bring, but at this stage, we're anticipating that based on the current usage, that we'll be seeing fairly similar usage next year. So we'll see if that's actually true or not.
Dwight, for perspective, how many buildings do you guys have in your portfolio, and how many scans are done on an annual basis?
Oh, you asked me a tough one. We didn't talk about it.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. We have a couple 100,000 buildings in the, I'm probably wrong with that, in the service. We have a collection of over 350 million individual device records. Per year, we're seeing anywhere between, that increase anywhere between 20 and 25 million times that a barcode is scanned within our service on an annual basis. If I can go back to the point that I was making, in this country, we're seeing things return fairly to normal. In other countries, Latin America has really been hit hard, and a lot of the companies who use our technology down there have not recovered in the same way. There's a lot more confusion down in Latin America. The authorities having jurisdiction have not insisted that inspection continues to take place, at least in a lot of the countries we're in. That may not be the same all throughout the entire country. We even have companies over in Asia, and an example I would say is the Maldives. The Maldives is an area that's completely tourist-based, and as tourism has entirely dried up there, work has pretty much stopped in the Maldives. So we see other countries affected much worse than this country in regards to usage.
I appreciate that. It's hopefully it gets a lot better soon. That's all I can say about that one. So when you think about fire alarm systems, we've talked about the technology, right? So they're becoming broader, and broader, right? So when you look at expanding them into incident management systems and mass notification systems, and that's certainly evident by some of the providers and vendors that are in our expo today. When you look at EST, fireworks or Hyperspike or Alertus, these systems are really becoming complex, and they're all integrated and working together. Somewhat along the line where Stephanie mentioned, with the sequence of operations. So, has that changed the way that we test and inspect and service, fire alarm systems now with all the different connectivity with the other systems? Have we seen anything change there?
Jim, I'm sorry, you broke up. Yeah, I'm not now, but I'm sorry, you broke up a little bit here, and I didn't catch your question.
Oh, it was really around, you look at the advent of mass notifications and incident management systems and all those things being incorporated now into the fire alarm system or becoming part of the fire alarm system. And have you seen any changes there relative to the inspections and servicing?
I'd have to say we have not, which has been really disappointing to us, because when with mass notification became integrated into the code, we thought there would be a large demand to get these systems installed, if not retrofitted, but certainly in new construction, because they're required. But we just have not seen the authorities having jurisdiction require that. Excuse me. So at least in our area, we have not seen a big demand for installing and then therefore not testing those. We are geared up for it. We are equipped for it. We're trained for it. I just don't, to my knowledge, I haven't seen it.
I appreciate that. Okay, anything from Stephanie or Dwight? No, okay.
Yeah, I think, just to answer a sliver of that question there, it, of course, is going to depend on the authority having jurisdiction. I mean, I've seen, just to kind of pan back for a second on your question, the approach is different, as far as, how those test and inspections are handled, considering complex systems. So the expertise level does look different out in the field for the selected provider to handle those types of systems. So, to that end, I've seen a difference. The competition, pool looks a little different based on the expertise of the staff that can support or understand how to approach and test those systems. So that's just a sliver of your question. But, again, from what I've seen, it does piggyback on Steve's comments, but it truly is going to depend on the enforcement of those particular systems and how to test them and whatnot.
Yeah, and on our side, on the technology side, we've gone ahead and provided for those systems to be inspected by putting in the device records as the code requires. Ultimately, we try and always design our systems around the code requirements. So they're all set to go, but I couldn't tell you whether we're seeing additional usage of those device records.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. So we're about 10 minutes left. We only have a couple of questions here, but why don't we jump to those, because I want to make sure that we hit them. Let's see here. I'll just read it off and we can respond to it. We have seen fire alarm systems incorporate mass notification, network capabilities, graphic enunciation, among other technologies over the years. what are the potential uses of fire alarm and life safety systems, for the future? So, what do we see coming down the pike relative to new technologies and fire alarm systems? If I think that, just from my perspective and looking at the industry for so many years, I think it's going to continue, in the advancement of the, graphical enunciations. It's going to the questioner's point. It's really, how do you incorporate all these other systems, right? So how do you notify, everyone in the building, no matter what type of risk it is? Is it an active shooter risk? Is it, weather related? Is it fire alarm? So it's really going to be I think the interoperability of all of those different types of systems. And then how do you get that information out? What do you do with that information? So you're seeing a lot of technology with the Internet of Things. I know some of the other, panel discussions that we've had here at Insight have talked about a lot of technology around, the Internet of Things and how the systems can communicate together, work together with security, work with video. So I think there's a lot of changes coming down the pike there, as well as you can talk about, you've got, cameras now that can detect smoke and integrate with fire alarm systems. So I think there's going to continue to see a lot more technical advancement, in the fire alarm space that you've seen for the last number of years in the security space. I don't know if anyone else has a view on that, but that's kind of, my view of it.
I think you hit it head on there, Jim. I mean, the only other thing that I can think of is just that self-diagnostic piece, as we look at the systems becoming more advanced. But I think, it sounds to me like the root of the question is, how do fire alarm systems and life safety systems, when we integrate with mass notification systems, what does that look like on a larger scale? I mean, that's a part of the question that I thought that I heard, and it sounds like you hit it head on there, Jim.
Yeah, good. Okay, so we have another question around, let's see here. Thoughts on a customer-assisted inspections. We kind of talked about earlier, we typically have 2 inspectors that would go out to a location, and oftentimes, the building owner, would like to have someone on their staff perform, that inspection with the inspector. What are your thoughts on, a owner-assisted inspection?
I couldn't tell you for sure how often that happens, but it's pretty frequent. It's almost unusual to be in a building without someone who's at least an escort and to get you into inaccessible spaces. So you may well have the building engineer with you all the time. But as far as them being physically active with documenting the signals as they come in or blowing smoke in detectors, that's a different matter. It's typically more efficient to my way of thinking, if we are the ones doing that, because we have the expertise in the systems. We always welcome the participation of the customer. In fact, I recommend they send somebody along. I want them to know, even during the testing, that we're doing our job, that we're heading everything, especially when we're new to the building. As far as having them an integral part of the testing team, I know we can adapt to that. I don't know that happens all that often.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, if I can add to that, Steve, we actually also are seeing a lot of self-inspections where a lot of facilities want to do or take over part of the inspection, not as much on fire alarm. We see this more in extinguisher, security, et cetera, like that. Sure. Where they're using our technology to do their own self-inspections. On fire alarm, we do see a lot of the larger facilities who do testing year-round because of the amount of buildings or the size of their complex, where they will go and hire a qualified person to do that self-inspecting. But that's the primary thing we see. A lot of self-inspecting going on now for the minor kind of inspections.
I have seen that with some hospital chains and large universities that have the technical staff to actually do their own testing. Absolutely.
I appreciate it. So we don't have any more questions, but real quick, Steve,
I think one more. No, go ahead. Sorry.
Do we have another question? Oh, maybe we did. Hold on a second. Okay, here's another question. Will DAS systems be included in scan program or buildingreports.com? Probably for you, Dwight.
They're already, well, you're asking a non-technical guy, but as far as I believe, they're already in there.
Right.
So I think you should be set for that. Yeah, I'm pretty sure we just put them in, and I think they're in security scan, if I'm getting that correct. But I'll follow up with I know the individual who asked that question, so I'll follow up with that one as well.
Yeah, and there was a related question around that should the fire alarm service company be the one expected to do those inspections? So yeah, we can follow up on that one. Right. Great. We have another question. In your opinion, how are the area of rescue systems requirements changing? Where to protect, and do you see it being integrated into fire alarm, or will it be separate? So when you're looking at areas of rescue, right, will it be incorporated?
You know, they do pop up from time to time, and we normally quote them separately as part of the package we provide. But I don't see them as often. I think what they'll look like in the future is probably a question for the individual. In our case, EST engineering, and whether they've considered that, I don't really know. But they're there, and we test them because they're there. So. And as far as where they protect, again, that's going to be code driven, and a good question for engineers, maybe even architects.
Okay, good, thanks. And I think we have time for one last question. How are dwelling unit notification appliances being tested in R2 occupancies during COVID? Oh, man, good question. No answer comes to mind. This is one, I don't know if people have a way of contacting us, or if we know who this person is, we can sure find out and get back to them. Nothing comes to mind, because that's a great question. I'm not sure how that's being done. Okay. Yeah, we can follow up with all the questions that we have, and we'll give written responses back to those who weren't able to get a response to. But I appreciate everyone that did send in a question. Okay. So with that, I would first like to thank the audience, for tuning in today. It's certainly been our pleasure to talk about a topic that we think is very, very important, and certainly thank Dwight, Stephanie, and Steve for participating in the panel. I think it's been a lot of fun, and please go out to the Insight Expo and visit all of the vendors that have been here to help support us for these 3 days. I think it's extremely important that you do that, and you can see what's the latest and greatest in both the fire alarm and security space today. So again, thank you, and have a great rest of your day, and be safe. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.